What's up, guys? I'm Hillbilly Dude, and today I brought out a few blankets, and I just wanted to make a quick little video on my personal opinion as an outdoorsman on each one of these blankets, their pros and cons in different situations and different uses, and I just kind of want to do a side-by-side comparison for blankets that are alternative to your actual sleep system. Now, these aren't going to be your main sleep system in most situations, okay? These are kind of an emergency or an additional thing to add to your sleep system if you have a mummy bag or whatever other kind of sleeping bag or whatever you got set up. These are basically just supplemental things that you can add to that, or in a pinch, you can make these work in the right situation. So I wanted to discuss these three. These are the three primary blankets I use outside of like my main sleeping bag. And I'm just going to kind of break them down, walk you through it, and make a quick little video about it. Stick around. Okay, so first of all, right here we have what I call an Indian blanket. I'm not exactly sure the name of what it is. I'm sure everybody will recognize this, and you automatically know what it feels like. This is cotton-based, I believe. These are all three about the same price, with the exception of the wool blanket. It will be significantly higher depending on what quality you get. But it's kind of this sweet-looking, loose knit kind of material. They're extremely warm as long as they stay dry. They're fairly heavy for the size, and like I said, they're kind of loose knit. They do keep you really warm because of that. They're super soft, and this is kind of the main blanket I keep like in my pickup. I'll keep this in my truck or my car, and I'll just use it for that way if we're going on road trips. You'll have something, and it kind of works good as an emergency, backup kind of situation because it's super soft, super comfortable. This is a lot more realistic for comfort than probably either one of these other two. But because it is heavy and because it's not wool, it's not going to keep you warm whenever it's wet. So my main use for this one is to keep it in my pickup. Also, this one here is one of my favorites to add to my sleep system, which is just, old sleeping bags. And I got military mummy bags, that kind of stuff. This here works if you need a little extra warmth in the night. And like I said, it's a lot softer. So I've got a pretty interesting story with one of these. Whenever I was about 16 years old, I was out on the river in the middle of the night running a trot line with one of my uncles. If you've ever run a trot line, you know that as you pull the line across to bait all your hooks or to run your hooks, pull the fish off, you got to be careful not to get snagged by those hooks. So I'm pulling this line across, the boat, and I had my jacket off. It was freezing. It was middle of the night, and I was working up a little bit of a sweat because I'm kind of fat. And so I took my jacket off. It snagged on one of the hooks, got drug overboard into the water. So I didn't have a jacket, at that point because it was soaking wet. And so my uncle had one of these that he used for a seat cover in his pickup. He just laid it out and draped it over the back of his seat. And so he went to his truck, he got this out, opened it up, took his pocket knife out, cut a slit in the middle, kind of the middle section of it, and put it over me like a poncho where my head went through the slit. I just wore it around me, put a string around it, and, improvised poncho, and it was extremely warm. And so these blankets are super, super useful. Like I said, they're affordable. They're not going to break the bank. So if you need to do something like that, like cut a slit in it and use it as a poncho in an emergency situation, you still got a good blanket afterwards. And if you need to replace it, you can afford to replace it. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough of these, especially for a good comfort camping kind of style blanket. This is the way to go. Next up is the good old wool blanket. Now this is actually a blend. This is one I got from my grandpa years ago, and I don't know if it was actually military surplus or not. I don't know where the tag's at, but it's a blend. Most of these you're not going to find are going to be 100% wool. They're going to be, a blend of wool and something else. And this is the same way. Now the higher end ones, you can probably get 100% wool, but they get pretty pricey, So anyways, these are good blankets, extremely warm. The best thing about wool, as you probably know, is if it gets wet, it will still insulate you and still keep you warm, even wet. That's why it's important to get wool base layer for like your hunting gear, wool socks. Anything wool is fantastic. It's durable. It is heavy. It is not quite as comfortable as something like this because wool is kind of scratchy, kind of itchy. You got to be a little more delicate when you're washing it. So there are a few drawbacks. And like I said, it will get a little more pricey the higher up you go as far as quality and where you find these. But this is a good blanket. It is bigger than this one. I've used this for years as part of my camping system. I actually would just roll it up in a roll and tie it whenever I would roll my mummy bag up and tie my mummy bag. I have a military surplus, military sleeping bag, and I would just use this in conjunction with that anytime through the year if it was going to be below, 50 degrees at night. This here really holds in the heat, and if nothing else, if you get too hot, you can always just lay it down and it gives you a good padding. But there's a lot you can do with this. Same thing like I discussed with this, where you can cut a hole in it. I know a lot of guys have cut holes in these, worn them like a poncho, and you have a wool poncho, and that's going to be extremely warm. So tons of uses for this. My preferred use for it is just with my sleep system. If I'm going on a camping trip and I'm actually taking all my camping gear and not just a quick little overnight hike, which this still isn't a bad option for that because it's fairly lightweight as far as blankets go, but it's not too bad. For the insulated value you're going to get, it's worth packing it. I would recommend putting a waterproof cover on it of some sort though if you're going to be packing it around. But yeah, so this here, basically I just use it for when I'm going on camping trips, deer camp, turkey camp, whatever, just camping with friends. I'll have this with me because it is a good insulative blanket. And if you're going to buy a wool blanket, I would recommend buying something decent quality. The better quality you get, the better off you're going to be. And if you ever need it, the more thankful you're going to be that you spent the money on a good one. If the weather's going to be colder, I definitely want one of these. And lastly, we have the good old-fashioned Woobie. This is a military poncho liner, also known as Woobie. It's got these strings attached to it all the way around. It opens up into a big square the same size as your military poncho. Now, if you know how your military poncho has those grommets all the way around the outside edges, these strings are sewn onto this, and if you lay your poncho out, lay this out on top of it, these strings should line up with the grommets. You can tie this off to your poncho, and now you have a improvised sleep system that you can lay down in your poncho, fold it over you, and you have this insulative liner with a waterproof outer edge. So anyways, yeah, these here are great. You can find these military surplus. You can find these brand new. You can find them in a variety of different camo patterns, which is awesome. And basically, the backstory on this, as far as I know, is these were used from, like, I think in the Vietnam era or something. They started using parachutes that had been used, and they was cutting them up and putting like nylon batting in it, and then, quilting it basically. And so it gives you kind of a lightweight nylon, really warm for the weight blanket. And it works good in conjunction with a poncho, by having these strings on there. It gives you a way to attach it to your poncho, and now, you get dual purpose. Because this is so light and it's really warm especially for the weight, I've been keeping this in my hunting bag, and I'll show you how I carry it. But basically, I just keep this rolled up, stuffed in a little bag, shoved down in the bottom of my hunting bag, and anytime I'm hunting, I'm camping, I'm hiking, whatever, I have this with me. I use this well over a dozen times this past deer season because I take my bag with me every time I go out hunting, and most mornings it gets pretty chilly, especially if you underdress for it. I always think I'm tougher than I am. And so I get out there, sit down, and after about 30 minutes of not moving, I'm freezing. But I keep this in there. It's camo. I just open it up, put it over my lap, put it over my shoulders, whatever I need to do with it. For the money I spent on this years ago, it has saved my tail plenty of times from being freezing cold. So I can't recommend these enough. I actually just bought one of my best friends one of these for his birthday because he didn't have one, and I think this is such an important piece of gear that every outdoorsman should have, especially if you have a dedicated bag that you use for hiking or hunting or whatever. This is a great thing to keep shoved down in the bottom of it at all times. And last ditch scenario, if need be, you can always use this and string it up like kind of as a weather cover kind of deal, like for rain or for shade or for keep snow off, whatever. Obviously, I wouldn't do that with this unless you absolutely need to and you had other sleeping gear, to keep you warm in a cold weather situation. But worst case scenario, it will offer you a little bit of cover. It'll dry quickly, but it is not waterproof by any means. So don't expect to use this as a tarp and it's just gonna, bail all the water off. It'll help, but you're gonna get a lot more use out of this using it, wrapped around you or paired with a good sleep system. This is a good place to start if you're looking for some kind of a blanket to carry in your pickup or in your hunting bag or whatever. I would recommend starting with this first. Now, price-wise, all three of these are relatively close with the exception of the wool blanket. The wool blanket can be found obviously quite a bit more expensive depending on the quality and where you get it from. But generally speaking, all three of these are relatively close in price. So this is my bag that I talked about. I just shove it down in there. I just happen to have a dress shirt, a long sleeve dress shirt that I didn't want sleeves on it. So I cut the sleeve off, tied one end off down here, got the other end open, attached this piece of paracord to it. Then I just fold this up and roll it up. Once I have it rolled up, I just shove it down in this here old shirt sleeve. And once I have that shoved down in there, I just fold this end over. I've got another little piece of string down on this end where I tied that off. I just run that one through it, and then you've got kind of like a trucker's hitch to cinch that down, and then you can just tie it off. And now you have a super neat wrapped up little bundle, tightly compressed. You can shove it down into the bottom of your bag and forget about it, and then it's there if you ever need it. Obviously there's other ways of doing that, but that's just kind of the old hillbilly way of doing it, and it works good for me. I've done it for years. So thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.